It was the kind of growl that vibrated through the floorboards, a primal, vicious sound that Arthur had never heard from his golden retriever Bailey in 10 years. Arthur stood at the top of the cellar stairs, his knuckles white as he gripped the door handle. His 5-year-old son, Timmy, was screaming, clutching his leg. "Get back!" Arthur shouted, kicking the dog away from the cellar door. "What's wrong with you?" Bailey wasn't listening. The dog was foaming at the mouth, snapping at the air, throwing his 80-pound body against the wood of the cellar door as if trying to break it down. Arthur thought the dog had gone mad. He thought the dog had rabies. He made a split-second decision to protect his family. He grabbed Bailey by the collar and shoved him into the cellar, slamming the door and locking the deadbolt. "Stay there until you calm down," Arthur yelled, his heart hammering. Silence fell over the house, heavy, suffocating silence. But 10 minutes later, from the darkness of the cellar beneath their feet, came a sound that froze the blood in Arthur's veins. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a growl. It was the high-pitched, bone-chilling hiss of something massive, followed by a yelp of pure agony. Arthur didn't know it yet, but he hadn't locked the dog in there to punish him. He had locked his best friend in a cage with a monster, and now it was too late. Welcome back to Shepherds of Hope. To understand the nightmare that unfolded in the Miller household that night, we have to go back 6 hours. The heat wave had been suffocating the small town of Oak Haven for 3 weeks. The ground was cracked, the air was thick enough to chew, and the wildlife was acting strange. Birds weren't singing. Deer were coming boldly into backyards looking for water. Nature was desperate. Arthur Miller was a man of logic, an accountant by trade, a father by choice, and a skeptic by nature. He didn't believe in bad omens. He believed in air conditioning and paying bills on time. His dog Bailey was the opposite. Bailey was pure emotion, an aging golden retriever with a graying muzzle and hips that clicked when he walked. Bailey was Timmy's shadow. Where the boy went, the dog went. They were inseparable. But that day, Bailey was off. From the moment the sun rose, the dog paced. He whined at the vents. He scratched at the floorboards in the kitchen. "He's just hot, Artie," Arthur's wife Sarah said, fanning herself at the breakfast table. "The heat is making everyone crazy." "He's destroying the linoleum," Arthur grumbled, watching Bailey dig frantically at a corner near the refrigerator. "Bailey, knock it off." The dog stopped, looked at Arthur with wide, frantic eyes, and then let out a low woof. It wasn't playful. It was a warning. Arthur ignored it. He had bigger problems. The weatherman had predicted a massive electrical storm to break the heat wave that evening. Flash floods were expected. As the sky turned bruised purple around 5 p.m., the atmosphere in the house shifted. The air pressure dropped so fast your ears popped. "Daddy, Bailey's scared," the boy said. Arthur looked over. Bailey wasn't just scared. He was trembling. But he wasn't hiding under the sofa like he usually did during thunder. He was standing guard. Specifically, he was standing guard in front of the door that led to the basement. The basement, or the cellar as they called it, was an unfinished dirt floor storage space. It was cool, damp, and filled with boxes of old clothes and holiday decorations. It was also where the main breaker box was. "He's fine, Timmy," Arthur said, distracted by the news report. Then the first crack of thunder shook the house foundations. The lights flickered. And Bailey snapped. The dog lunged at the cellar door, scratching the wood. barking with a ferocity that sprayed spit across the floor. "Bailey, stop!" Sarah yelled, startled. But the dog wouldn't stop. He was frantic. He was desperate. Arthur stood up, a frustration boiling over. "That's it. I'm putting him in the garage." He reached for the dog's collar. Bailey spun around, and for the first time in his life, he bared his teeth at Arthur. It wasn't aggression toward his master. It was a barrier. Bailey used his body to shove Arthur away from the cellar door. He wasn't trying to get in. He was trying to keep them out. But Arthur misread the signal. He saw a dog that had lost its mind. He saw a threat to his son. "You want to act like a wild animal?" Arthur snapped, adrenaline taking over. "Then you can cool off in the dark." He wrestled the dog. It took all his strength. He dragged Bailey, who was clawing at the carpet, and threw him down the cellar stairs into the pitch black. He slammed the door. He turned the lock. "Daddy, no!" Timmy cried. "He's crying. He's scared." "He's dangerous right now, Tim," Arthur said, breathing hard. "We'll let him out when the storm passes." If Arthur had looked closely at the gap beneath the door, if he had knelt down, he might have smelled it. A musky, dry scent like rotten cucumbers. The scent of a king cobra. The storm broke with violence. Rain lashed against the windows like gravel. The wind howled. Upstairs, the family tried to eat, or to dinner. But the mood was shattered. From beneath the floorboards, they could hear Bailey. At first, he was barking. Then he was scratching the wood of the stairs. "Arthur, maybe we should bring him up," Sarah whispered, pushing her peas around her plate. "He sounds terrified." "He snapped at me, Sarah," Arthur said, though his own guilt was starting to gnaw at him. "If I let him up now, he learns that aggression gets him what he wants. He needs a timeout." Then the barking stopped. It didn't taper off. It cut out instantly. "See?" Arthur said, taking a sip of water. He settled down. But then came the sounds that didn't make sense. Thump, crash, the sound of boxes tumbling over, the sound of glass jars shattering on the dirt floor. What is he doing down there? Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. He's tearing the place apart. "Daddy," Timmy whispered, his eyes wide. "He's fighting the monsters." Arthur rolled his eyes. "There are no monsters, Timmy, just a bad dog making a mess." Then came the sound that changed everything. A high-pitched yelp. It was a sound of surprise and pain, followed by a low, gurgling whimper. And then, absolute silence. "That didn't sound right, Arthur." Sarah stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That sounded like he got hurt." Arthur felt a pit open in his stomach. He stood up. "Okay, I'll go check. Maybe he knocked a shelf onto himself." Arthur grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. He walked to the cellar door. He unlocked it. He expected Bailey to burst out, tail wagging, apologizing. He opened the door. Nothing. Just darkness and the smell of the damp earth, and something else. That metallic, copper smell of fresh blood. "Bailey?" Arthur called out. No movement. Arthur took a step down. The wooden stairs creaked. He swept the flashlight beam across the bottom of the stairs. He saw the overturned boxes. He saw the shattered mason jars of pickles Sarah had canned last year. And then the beam landed on Bailey. The golden retriever was lying on his side in the dirt, about 10 feet from the stairs. He was panting heavily, his breaths coming in ragged, wet gasps. Foam mixed with blood was dripping from his jowls. "Oh, God," Arthur gasped. He ran down the stairs, forgetting his anger, forgetting the storm. "Bailey, buddy." He reached the dog. Bailey's eyes were swollen shut. His head was massive, swollen to nearly twice its size. 2 distinct puncture wounds, oozing dark blood, were visible on his snout. Arthur froze. Snake bite. But this was Oak Haven. They had garter snakes. Maybe a copperhead in the deep woods, but a copperhead bite wouldn't cause swelling this fast. This was immediate necrosis. Arthur looked around frantically. Where is it? Where is it? He swept the flashlight beam around the cellar. And then he saw the skin. In the corner, draped over an old trunk, was a shed skin. It was translucent and dry. But it was long. Impossibly long. 10 feet. 12 feet. Arthur's brain couldn't process it. A snake that size didn't exist in this hemisphere. Then, from the darkness of the rafters above his head, he heard it. A sound like a high-pressure steam pipe leaking. Psst. Arthur slowly pointed the flashlight up. Coiled around the wooden beam, directly above the stairs, the only exit was a creature out of a nightmare. It was olive green with pale crossbands. Its hood was flared, wide as a dinner plate. A king cobra. An escaped exotic pet. A lethal predator that could kill an elephant with one bite. And it was blocking the way out. Arthur was trapped. And his son, Timmy, was standing at the top of the stairs. Daddy, is Bailey okay? Timmy, close the door, Arthur screamed, his voice cracking with terror. Close the door and lock it, now. But Daddy, do it, Arthur roared. The boy, terrified by his father's tone, slammed the door shut. The click of the latch echoed like a gunshot. Arthur was alone in the dark with a dying dog and a king cobra. The flashlight beam wavered in his shaking hand. The snake swayed back and forth, its tongue flicking, tasting the air. It was agitated. It had already fought. It had already killed. Or so it thought. Arthur looked down at Bailey. The dog was fading. The venom was shutting down his nervous system. But Bailey was trying to stand up. The old dog, blind from the swelling, smelling the fear on his master, dragged his front paws through the dirt. He let out a low, wet growl. He was placing himself between Arthur and the snake. No, Bailey, stay down, Arthur whispered, tears streaming down his face. You've done enough, boy, you've done enough. Arthur looked around for a weapon, a shovel, a pipe, anything. His hand landed on an old rusted tire iron near the furnace. He gripped it. The cobra hissed again, dropping lower from the rafter. It was descending. It was coming for him. Arthur swung the flashlight, trying to keep the beam on the serpent's black, beady eyes. The snake struck. A blur of motion. Arthur dodged, falling backward over a box of old books. The snake's fangs hit the dirt where his leg had been a second before. The cobra reared up again, standing nearly 4 feet off the ground, hood spread, looking Arthur in the eye. This was it. But suddenly, a golden blur launched from the shadows. Bailey, the dog, barely able to breathe, summoned the last ounce of his strength. He didn't bite. He couldn't. His jaw was too swollen. He threw his body weight against the snake, slamming the reptile against the furnace. The snake struck Bailey again. In the shoulder, Bailey yelped, a sound that shattered Arthur's heart and collapsed. But the distraction gave Arthur the second he needed. He swung the tire iron with every ounce of fatherly panic he possessed. Crack. The metal connected with the snake's spine. The cobra writhed, thrashing wildly, its tail whipping the air like a lash. Arthur swung again and again, until the movement stopped. Arthur dropped the tire iron, gasping for air. He crawled over to Bailey. The dog wasn't moving. His breathing had stopped. No, Arthur sobbed. He started compressions on the dog's chest. "Breathe, damn it, breathe!" Upstairs, Sarah was pounding on the door. "Arthur, Arthur, open the door!" "Call 911. Arthur screamed up the stairs. "Tell them we have a snake bite. King Cobra, we need anti-venom now." The next hour was a blur of flashing lights and sirens. The paramedics were terrified to enter the cellar until Arthur confirmed the snake was dead. They carried Bailey out on a stretcher, usually reserved for humans. The dog was clinically dead. No pulse, no breath. But the EMT, a man named Rodriguez who loved dogs, refused to give up. He intubated Bailey right there on the front lawn in the pouring rain. He pushed epinephrine. "Come on, buddy," Rodriguez muttered, pumping the oxygen bag. "Come on." Timmy stood on the porch, screaming for his dog. Sarah held him back, weeping. And then, a miracle. A faint, erratic heartbeat appeared on the monitor. "He's got a pulse," Rodriguez shouted. "Go, go, go." They loaded Bailey into the back of the ambulance. Arthur jumped in with them. The nearest facility with King Cobra anti-venom was the zoo, 40 miles away. The police provided a high-speed escort shutting down the highway. Inside the ambulance, Arthur held Bailey's paw. It was cold. "I'm sorry," Arthur whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry. I thought you were bad. You were saving us. You were saving us the whole time." He realized now. Bailey hadn't been digging at the kitchen floor because of the heat. He was digging because he heard the snake moving in the crawl space below. He hadn't blocked the cellar door to be aggressive. He was blocking Timmy from walking into a death trap. Every bad thing the dog had done that day was a heroic act of communication that Arthur had been too blind to see. They arrived at the veterinary trauma center. A team of specialists, alerted by the zoo, was waiting. They injected the anti-venom. The vet, Dr. Hansen, looked grave. "The swelling is compressing his trachea. His kidneys are failing. The sheer amount of venom. Arthur, you need to prepare yourself." Arthur sat in the waiting room, covered in dirt and his dog's blood. He put his head in his hands and prayed to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. "Take me," he whispered. "Don't take him. He's a better person than I am." 3 days. For 3 days, Bailey lay in a coma. The swelling was so bad, he looked unrecognizable. Timmy slept in the waiting room chairs. He refused to leave. On the 4th morning, the sun broke through the clouds. The heat wave was gone. The air was crisp. Dr. Hansen walked into the waiting room. He looked tired. He walked over to Arthur. Arthur stood up, bracing himself for the worst. "He's awake," Dr. Hansen said, a tired smile touching his lips. "And he's asking for food." Arthur fell to his knees, sobbing with relief. When they finally allowed them back to see him, Bailey looked like he had gone 12 rounds with a heavyweight boxer. Shaved patches, tubes, stitches. But when he saw Timmy, that tail, that a beautiful feathery golden tail, gave a weak, rhythmic thump, thump, thump against the bedding. Bailey let out a soft whine and tried to lift his head. Arthur rushed forward and buried his face in the dog's neck. "You're a good boy." Arthur choked out. "You're the best boy." The news of the Cellar hero spread. Experts later confirmed the snake was an illegal pet that had escaped during the heat wave, seeking the cool dampness of the miller's cellar. If Bailey hadn't stopped Timmy from going downstairs for a popsicle, if Bailey hadn't fought that snake, Timmy would be dead. Bailey lived another 4 years. He walked with a limp, and he had a scar across his nose, a badge of honor that he wore proudly. Arthur never raised his voice at the dog again. and he never ever questioned Bailey's instincts. Animals perceive the world in ways we cannot comprehend. They see the threats we miss, they hear the dangers we ignore, and sometimes they are the only thing standing between us and the darkness. If this story of bravery and redemption touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps us share these heroes with the world. And for more incredible stories of animals who went above and beyond, make sure to subscribe to the Shepherds of Hope channel. Until next time, trust your dog. They know more than you think.